What's up, barbecue fans? My name is Jake, and today we are doing a delicious Stromboli. We're doing it in the Yoder wood-fired oven. Let's get into it. So yesterday we made our dough. I'm going to go over that whole process in a minute. Before we can do that, we got to fire up our pit here. I've got the Yoder Smokers wood-fired oven insert in, and we put in some Bear Mountain oak pellets. All we got to do is fire this guy up. We're going to set this at 400. Because it's a beautiful spring-like day. It's actually the very beginning of February, but we've got some really nice weather. It's still 45 out, but the sun makes it feel warmer. I did take a moment to clean all this out, right? If you get a chance, especially before you use the wood-fired oven, just give it a quick vacuum. It just helps minimize the dust that's gonna flow around. And additionally, I've told you guys this many times, but inside there's the pit probe. Make sure you keep that clean. It will throw off your temperature a little bit, so I gave that a scrub as well. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna give this guy about 30 minutes to preheat to 400. We're gonna run our cook for about 15 to 20 minutes, okay? We wanna get our stone nice and hot in that time, and I've got a little bit of time for my dough to rise, so I'm gonna take advantage of that and get this guy up to temperature. So while our pit's getting up to temperature, let's talk about dough. I made this yesterday. I did cheat and use a KitchenAid mixer with the dough hook for a little bit, but super easy to make. Anyone can make this. If you've never made dough, give it a shot. All we did is we took 350 grams of warm water between 90 and 95 degrees. I then took 13 grams of fine sea salt. I used some Morton sea salt because I had it in the fine just so it breaks down the water pretty easily. Then we used 1.5 grams of after dry yeast. That's like 3/4 of a tablespoon. And put that all together, and then we used 500 grams of all-purpose flour for this particular recipe. I used all-purpose just because it'll be a little bit of a thicker dough, and I think it'll just hold up a little nicer for a Stromboli. Then what I did is I mixed this for about 5 minutes on a medium speed with my KitchenAid. Then I let it sit for 20 minutes, let the gluten relax, and then I kneaded it by hand for another 5, 6, 7 minutes. Now, my house is very humid. My wife is really into plants, so I've got these like portable humidifiers all over the main floor. So I ended up adding a little bit of flour to this several times. It changed your hydration a little bit, but it was quite sticky. You know, don't be afraid to add a little bit or use some olive oil on your hands, but don't add a ton, right? It really changes the recipe. So I sprinkled a little bit on that. I kept kneading it. And then what I did is once I was happy with how it felt, it was fairly smooth, then I made a dough ball. Make sure you seal the bottom of that dough ball, and I threw it in a bowl for 2 hours, put a little bit of olive oil on the top, covered it in saran wrap, and just let it sit there for 2 hours. Then after 2 hours, I cut it in two. So I think it was 427 and 437 grams each of them. So I grabbed the bigger one for this. It doesn't really matter. They're pretty darn close, but it will make two there. Side note, this is already proofed the second time. So right now, if I wanted to use this for another time, I could throw this in the freezer, wait till it gets firm, and then cover it in like parchment paper or something like that, throw in a Ziploc bag, and you can use it another time. Just pull it out 24 hours in advance and then let it sit for 90 minutes on the counter, and it's as good as it is today. So anyhow, divided it up, I made the balls, I threw it in my dough ball container, and then I threw them in the fridge. Now they're in the fridge for about 16 hours, just to give you an idea. After I put the dough in the fridge, what I did is I made up a quick sauce. You guys have seen me make it before, but it's super simple. 1 can of tomatoes, a little bit of olive oil, some fresh basil, maybe 3/4 of a tablespoon of salt. Same with some pepper. I cracked some fresh pepper with my pepper cannon. You guys know I love that thing, and I love fresh pepper. So then I did is I put it on high speed, and I used the pulse button, and I pulsed it 3 times. That's all you need. You don't need to cook sauce at all. Throw it in a container, and then I threw that in the fridge as well. And then the other thing I did this morning is I grated up some fresh cheese because you really should be using fresh cheese if you're gonna go through all this work. Don't use the bagged pre-shredded stuff because it's got anti-caking agents in it, and it just doesn't melt the same. Then what we did is about an hour and a half ago now, I took out my dough, I let it sit on the countertop, and you can see I transferred it into a different container here because I needed, I'm shooting a couple pizza videos, I needed my pizza container for something else. But I just put some olive oil on the top and I covered it with saran wrap, and that way it'll come off here super easily, right? if it starts to stick, you didn't use enough olive oil or something like that, don't be afraid to kind of treat it like a Band-Aid and rip it a little quick, right? Sometimes you got to push on this end and pull away, but as you can see, if you use enough olive oil, you'll be fine. Let me go get our ingredients and we'll put this bad boy together. All right, so I flipped over my cutting board so I don't have my juice groove here. We'll throw on some parchment paper just to make it a little easier. And our goal here is to make kind of a rectangle, okay? You want this fairly thick still, right? Don't go too thin. We want a little bit of bread with our bites here. Perfect. All right, so let's get our sauce out here. Again, this has just been in the fridge since I made it yesterday. You can see it's got a little chunk to it. If you want a little less chunky, pulse it another time or so, but I like a little bit of a texture to my sauce. Now don't go to the edge here. You want to have a clean, dry edge so that it will all seal. Here we go. I don't quite have as much ham as I would have liked, so we're going to put some pepperoni in the mix here. Here we go. Now I've got some onions here. Now I just sauteed these real quick just to break them down a little bit, make them a little softer. And I really do like red onions on pizza. If you haven't tried them, give them a shot. Go on with a little bit of pepperoni. Not too much here. Perfect. Last but not least, gotta have some cheese. Now this is one of those situations where you actually can go too much cheese, it will just leak out. So try and resist the temptation. I mean, this is a lot here. I'm a boundary pusher, what can I say? So now what we do is we're going to have a sip of our rum and coke. Cheers. We're gonna try and roll this up a little bit. And I'm gonna go take this behind me so that it kind of sits there. Now the big thing here is you wanna like lift up and roll over, right? You don't wanna push all your toppings around. I'm gonna stretch this out just a little bit so I can make sure I got a dry area here. All right, there we go. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna seal off our ends here, and then I'm gonna pull my seam up a little bit. What this will do is this will help avoid a blowout. And I'll make sure we're sealed, and I'm gonna pull that down like so. Touch all of that. This one I got a little too close to the end, so I'm gonna try and tuck it underneath here a little bit. And then the trick here is we wanna pick it up, and I wanna put it back in the center of the parchment paper, but I wanna get that seam on the bottom. There we go. All right, like so. That'll just help prevent a blowout. Now what we can do is we can kind of pick this guy up a little bit. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go get my pizza peel. We're perfectly at 410 right now, so that'll be good temp. I'm just gonna trim this off a little bit and throw this in the oven. Now obviously it's a little longer than the peel, so be careful when you do this. This guy's quite long. It's just gonna fit. I had to do a trial fit because I was a little worried. But what I gotta do here is we're gonna do one thing. We're gonna give a little bit of an egg bath here. This is gonna help brown up the outside nicely. And now we wanna give some vents here. So get a sharp knife. And I just did that approximately the sizes that I'm gonna use for slicing. Just fits. So now we're gonna let that go for 15-20 minutes. Because one side is closer to the fire a little bit, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rotate it around halfway through, but I'll show you when we get to that point. It's been 10 minutes, we're gonna turn this guy around and have our first look. Wow. Not too bad. We can spin this guy around here. Put this guy back in. There we go. We'll give that about another 8 to 10 minutes by the looks of it. All right, so right around the 19-minute mark, it's time to pull it out. Look at that thing of beauty. Now, Did get a little bit of a blowout at the side. Most of that's from how I was shimmying it around. It was a little longer than it needed to be honest. But we're gonna make sure that this moves. Try and slide it off this rack, or onto the rack. Oh, Ollie comes running. All right, this thing is gonna be super, super hot. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna let this cool down for a good 15 minutes, maybe even 20, then we'll slice into it and have a look at how it looks on the inside. All right, so I lasted almost 15 minutes. It's long enough for me. This thing smells delicious, and I don't wanna wait. So let me just cut in here like so. Still steaming on the inside, so it's still quite hot. Look what we got going on there. Nice little cross section. Am I gonna regret this? We'll see. Wow. That, my friends, is well worth the work. I've made pizzas before, I've made calzones before, but I've actually never made a stromboli, and that is phenomenal. The one thing I'll tell you about those onions is that I did turn up the heat a little bit and I let them caramelize so they got some color on them. A little bit higher than a saute, and they added a little bit of pop in the background that I'm absolutely loving. 20 minutes, well, for me it was 19.5 minutes on the Yoder at 400 in the wood-fired oven. Before we sign off, don't forget to check out my website. I got a 25,000 subscriber giveaway coming up. We just crossed 24,000, so we're almost there. Sign up for my newsletter and enter. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed yet, why the hell not? Do that while you're down there. I'll see you soon.